The pain hit like lightning, splitting her spine in half. Mira doubled over behind the ancient oak, one hand pressed against her swollen belly, the other gripping bark so hard her claws left gouges in the wood. Around her, the pack's voices rose in the ceremonial chant, their words weaving through the night air like smoke. The blood moon hung above them, casting everything in shades of crimson and shadow. Not now, she thought desperately. Please, not now. But her body had other plans. Another contraction seized her, stronger this time, and she couldn't hold back the cry that tore from her throat. The chanting stopped. Silence fell over the clearing like a heavy blanket, broken only by the crackling of the ceremonial fire. Mira straightened slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs as dozens of eyes turned her way. At the center of the circle, Alpha Damon stood frozen, his dark hair gleaming in the firelight, his mouth slightly open in shock. "Mira," his voice carried across the space between them. She tried to speak, tried to tell him it would be okay, that she could wait, but another wave of pain crashed over her and she stumbled forward. Warm liquid trickled down her legs. "Her water's broken," whispered Elder Sarah, her weathered face pale in the moonlight. The words rippled through the pack like a stone thrown into still water. Murmurs rose, then grew louder, tinged with fear and something darker. "The blood moon," someone gasped. "It's happening during the blood moon." The prophecy. Damon was at her side in an instant, his strong arms catching her as her knees buckled. For a moment, his familiar scent, pine and earth and something uniquely him, wrapped around her like comfort. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing away the tear she didn't realize had fallen. "I've got you," he murmured, and she almost believed everything would be all right. Then she saw his beta, Marcus, approaching with quick steps, his expression grim. He leaned close to Damon's ear, whispering urgently. Mira caught fragments. Cursed timing. The old stories. Destruction to the pack. The change in Damon was immediate. His arms stiffened around her, and when she looked up at his face, the warmth in his dark eyes had been replaced by something cold and terrible. "Damon," she whispered. He stepped back, letting her sway on unsteady legs. "Take her to the birthing den," he said, his voice carrying the authority of an alpha's command. But there was no tenderness in it. No love. The birth was a nightmare of pain and whispered fears. Elder Sarah attended her, but even the pack's healer seemed afraid to touch her, as if the curse might be contagious. Through the small window of the den, the blood moon watched like a malevolent eye. When her son finally came into the world, his first cry split the night like a knife. Mira reached for him with shaking hands, desperate to hold him, to see his face. But Sarah pulled the baby away, wrapping him quickly in a rough blanket. "Let me see him," Mira gasped, struggling to sit up. "Please." Sarah's face was white as bone. "Child, there's something you need to know." She unwrapped the blanket just enough to reveal the baby's left shoulder, and Myra's breath caught in her throat. There, stark against his tiny, perfect skin, was a birthmark in the shape of a crescent moon. But it wasn't the usual brown or red. It gleamed like liquid silver, seeming to pulse with its own inner light. "The mark," Sarah breathed. "The silver mark of prophecy." Before Mira could respond, the den's entrance flap was thrown back and Damon strode in, flanked by Marcus and 3 other pack members. His face could have been carved from stone. "Show me," he commanded. Sarah hesitated, then revealed the birthmark. The men behind Damon stepped back as if struck, but the alpha himself seemed to grow colder, more distant. "Damon," Mira whispered, "he's our son. Our baby." For just a moment, something flickered across his features, love, perhaps, or longing. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of leadership. "The prophecy speaks of a child born under the blood moon, bearing the silver mark," he said, his voice echoing off the den walls. "It says such a child will bring destruction to any pack that harbors him." "Those are just stories," Mira protested, clutching her son closer. "Old wives' tales." "Are they?" Marcus stepped forward, his lip curled in disgust. "Look around you, Mira. The very night of his birth, the blood moon rises for the first time in 50 years. The ancient spirits are restless. The deer have fled our territory. Even the wind carries the scent of death. That's coincidence. Enough." Damon's voice cut through her words like a blade. "The Pack Council has decided. You and the child are banished. You have until dawn to leave our territory." The words hit her like physical blows. "You can't mean that." "Damon, please, I'm your mate. This is your son." But he was already turning away. "You were my mate," he said without looking back. "Now you're nothing." The pack members filed out behind him, leaving only Sarah, who wouldn't meet Myra's eyes. "I'm sorry," the elder whispered. But the alpha has spoken. Dawn came too soon and not soon enough. Mira had spent the remaining hours of night gathering what little she could carry. Some dried meat, a water skin, a warm cloak for the baby. Her body ached from the birth, every step sending fresh waves of pain through her. But she forced herself to move. The pack had gathered at the territory's edge to see them off. Or maybe to make sure they actually left. Mira couldn't tell the difference anymore. Damon stood apart from the others, his face a mask she no longer recognized. When she approached him one last time, baby cradled against her chest, he didn't even look down at his son. "His name," she said quietly. "Don't I get to tell you his name?" A muscle jumped in his jaw. "He has no name. The nameless bring no curses." But she leaned closer anyway, close enough to catch his scent one more time. "I'm calling him Phoenix," she whispered, "because he'll rise from the ashes of what you've done to us." Then she turned and walked into the forbidden wasteland, her head held high despite the tears streaming down her face. The territory boundary was marked by a line of standing stones, each one carved with protective runes meant to keep dangers out, or in. Mira paused at the threshold, looking back at the only home she'd ever known. At the pack that had raised her, loved her, accepted her. At the mate who had just thrown her away like garbage. Then she stepped across the line and kept walking. The wasteland stretched before them like a sea of gray rock and twisted trees. Nothing grew here except poisonous thorns and bitter weeds. The stories said it was cursed, that the spirits of ancient battles still walked its barren paths. Maybe that was true. Maybe it was just another lie told to keep people afraid. Either way, it was home now. Phoenix began to cry as the sun climbed higher, his small voice echoing off the empty stones. Mira tried to comfort him, tried to sing the lullabies her own mother had sung to her, but her voice kept breaking. How could she promise him everything would be all right when she didn't believe it herself? By midday, her legs were shaking with exhaustion, and she was forced to rest in the shade of a dead tree. She unwrapped Phoenix to check his birthmark, half hoping it had been a fever dream brought on by the pain of labor. But there it was, silver as moonlight, seeming to shimmer even in the harsh daylight. As she watched, the mark seemed to pulse gently, in rhythm with the baby's heartbeat. "What are you?" she whispered to her son. "What are we supposed to do?" The answer came as a howl in the distance, long, mournful, and definitely not from her former pack. It was answered by another, then another, until the wasteland rang with the sound. Mira gathered Phoenix close and struggled to her feet. Whatever was out there, she couldn't face it sitting down. The howls grew closer, and through the heat shimmer rising from the rocks, she saw them, shapes moving with fluid grace between the stone pillars. Wolves, but bigger than any she'd ever seen, their fur ranging from silver white to deep black. And their eyes. Their eyes burned gold in the afternoon sun. One of them, a massive silver male, padded closer. He should have been terrifying, should have sent every instinct screaming at her to run. Instead, something in his ancient gaze seemed almost familiar. He shifted then, his form blurring and reshaping until a man stood before her, tall, lean, with silver hair and those same burning eyes. Scars covered his arms and chest, and when he smiled, she saw that his canine teeth were longer and sharper than they should be. "Well," he said, his voice like gravel and honey, "what do we have here?" More wolves emerged from behind the stones, all shifting to human form. Men and women with wild hair and wilder eyes, their skin marked with scars and strange tattoos. They didn't look like any pack she'd ever seen. "I'm just passing through," Mira managed, backing against the dead tree. "I don't want any trouble." The silver-haired man tilted his head, studying her with unsettling intensity. "Passing through to where, little mother? There's nothing beyond the wasteland but death and worse things." "Then I guess that's where I'm going." He laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Such fire. I can see why you bore a child under the blood moon." His golden eyes shifted to the bundle in her arms. "May I see him?" Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, to run, to fight. But Phoenix was crying again, and her water skin was nearly empty, and the sun was merciless in this dead place. Slowly, she pulled back the blanket to reveal her son's face. The man's expression changed instantly. The casual amusement vanished, replaced by something that looked almost like awe. He dropped to one knee before her, his pack following suit. "The silver mark," he breathed. "After all these years, he's finally come home." Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. The silver-haired man rose slowly, his golden eyes never leaving Phoenix's face. Around them, His pack remained kneeling, their heads bowed as if in the presence of royalty. The sight made Myra's skin crawl with unease. "What do you want with my son?" she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. "Want?" The man smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Child, you don't understand what you carry. That mark, it's not just prophecy. It's bloodline. Ancient bloodline that was thought lost forever." Before Mira could respond, he gestured to his pack. "Bring food and water. Fresh clothes. The mother needs." "I don't need anything from you," Mira interrupted, taking a step back. "We'll manage on our own." The man's expression hardened. "In the wasteland? With a newborn? You'll be dead before the next blood moon rises." He paused, studying her defiant stance. "But I admire your fire." "Very well. Take the northern path, follow it for 2 days. You'll find a hidden spring near the black stones. If you survive that long." Without another word, he shifted back to wolf form and bounded away, his pack melting into the shadows like smoke. Within moments, Mira was alone again with her crying son and the merciless sun. She should have felt relieved. Instead, she felt oddly abandoned. The next 3 days blurred together in a haze of heat, thirst, and exhaustion. Phoenix's cries grew weaker, his tiny body hot with fever. Myra's milk was drying up from dehydration, and the small amount of dried meat she'd brought was long gone. On the 3rd morning, she stumbled and fell, skinning her knees on sharp rocks. Phoenix barely whimpered. When she tried to stand, her legs refused to support her weight. "This is it," she thought distantly. "This is how we die." But as she lay there, feeling the life drain out of her like water through sand, she heard it. The sound of running water. Impossible in this dead place, but unmistakable. Summoning strength she didn't know she possessed, Mira crawled toward the sound, dragging herself across the burning rocks with Phoenix clutched to her chest. Around a bend in the path, hidden behind a curtain of black stones, she found it. A spring of crystal-clear water bubbled up from deep underground, creating a small oasis of green in the wasteland's desolation. Palm trees provided blessed shade, and she could smell the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine. Mira collapsed at the water's edge and drank deeply, the cool liquid like heaven on her parched throat. She cupped handfuls of water and let them trickle over Phoenix's fever-hot skin until his breathing eased and his eyes fluttered open. "We made it," she whispered to him. "We're going to be okay." That's when the world went black. She woke to the scent of sandalwood and something else. Something wild and masculine that made her pulse quicken despite her weakness. Soft silk surrounded her instead of rough stone, and when she tried to sit up, gentle hands pressed her back down. "Easy," a deep voice rumbled. "You've been unconscious for 2 days." Myra's eyes flew open to find herself staring up at a stranger. He was perhaps 30, with shoulder-length black hair and storm-gray eyes that seemed to see straight through her. Scars crisscrossed his bronze chest and arms. Not the random marks of accident or battle, but deliberate patterns that looked almost ceremonial. "Phoenix," she gasped, trying to sit up again. "Where's my son?" "Safe." The man nodded toward a smaller silk cushion where Phoenix lay sleeping peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling in healthy rhythm. "I've been feeding him goat's milk. He seems to like it." Relief flooded through her so powerfully she nearly wept. "Thank you. I don't know how to repay." "No need." The stranger dipped a cloth in a bowl of water and pressed it to her forehead. "I'm Cain, and you're trespassing on my territory." Despite his words, there was no threat in his voice. If anything, he sounded amused. Mira looked around what she'd assumed was a tent and realized it was far more luxurious than anything she'd ever seen. Persian rugs covered the ground, and the furniture was inlaid with gold and precious stones. This wasn't the dwelling of a simple wasteland scavenger. "Your territory?" she asked carefully. "This spring and the lands around it, yes." Cain set the cloth aside and offered her a cup of something that smelled like honey and herbs. "Drink this. It will help restore your strength." Mira accepted the cup but didn't drink immediately. "You live alone out here?" "I prefer solitude." There was something in the way he said it that warned her not to push further. Instead, she sipped the honey mixture and felt warmth spread through her chest. Whatever was in it, it was working. Already she felt less weak, more alert. "What pack are you from?" Cain asked, settling back on his heels. "I was from the Moonridge pack." The past tense tasted bitter on her tongue. "But I've been banished." "Banished?" Cain's voice went flat. "For what crime?" Mira hesitated. Most wolves would react with fear or disgust when they learned about Phoenix's birthmark. But Cain had already seen her son, had cared for him while she was unconscious. Surely if he meant them harm, he would have acted by now. My son was born during the blood moon, she said finally. The pack believes he's cursed. Kane's gray eyes sharpened with sudden interest. May I see the mark? Something in his tone made her skin prickle with warning, but she nodded. Kane lifted Phoenix gently from his cushion, unwrapping the blanket with practiced ease. When the silver crescent was revealed, he went very still. Remarkable, he murmured, tracing the air just above the mark without actually touching it. The old bloodlines run strong in him. You know about the prophecy? I know many things about many prophecies. Kane wrapped Phoenix again and settled him back on his cushion. But not all prophecies mean what people think they mean. Before Mira could ask what he meant by that, Phoenix began to fuss. Kane moved to comfort him with surprising gentleness for such a large man, and Mira found herself studying her mysterious rescuer more closely. Everything about him spoke of wealth and power. The fine silk of his clothes, the precious metals adorning his tent, the way he moved with absolute confidence in his own space. Yet he claimed to be alone in the wasteland, tending a hidden spring like some kind of hermit. Why are you really here? She asked. Kane glanced up from Phoenix, one dark eyebrow raised. I beg your pardon? This place, this luxury, it's not the dwelling of a lone wolf scratching out survival in the wasteland. So what are you hiding from? For a moment, something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Then he smiled, and she realized the expression was more unsettling than his anger would have been. Perhaps I'm hiding from the same things you are, he said quietly. Judgment. Fear. The narrow-minded cruelty of pack politics. There was truth in his words, but not the whole truth. Mira could sense it in the careful way he spoke, the way his eyes never quite met hers when he talked about himself. Kane was hiding something big. But then again, so was she. Running away with a supposedly cursed child wasn't exactly something you announced to strangers. Over the next few days, they fell into an easy routine. Kane hunted and provided food while Mira recovered her strength. He was surprisingly good with Phoenix, seeming to know instinctively when the baby was hungry or needed changing. More than once, she caught him staring at her son with an expression she couldn't quite read. Part fascination, part longing, part something that looked almost like recognition. You're very good with him, she commented one evening as they sat beside the spring. Kane was holding Phoenix, letting the baby grip his finger with tiny hands. I like children, Kane said simply. They haven't learned to lie yet. Is that what you think adults do? Lie, don't you? The question hung in the air between them like a challenge. Mira felt heat rise in her cheeks because he was right. She was lying, or at least omitting major parts of the truth. But wasn't he doing the same thing? Sometimes, she admitted, when the truth would hurt more than help. And which is this? Kane asked, his gray eyes meeting hers directly for the first time. Truth or lie? Before she could answer, a sound made them both freeze, the distant howling of a wolf pack on the hunt. But this wasn't the mournful cry she'd heard from the silver-haired pack. This was aggressive, purposeful. Familiar. Damon, she whispered, her blood turning to ice. Kane's expression hardened instantly. Your former mate? He must have sent trackers. Mira scrambled to her feet, snatching Phoenix from Kane's arms. We have to run. If he finds us. He won't. Kane stood as well, and suddenly he seemed larger, more imposing. The air around him practically crackled with barely contained power. Take Phoenix into the tent. Stay there until I come for you. Kane, you don't understand. Damon is an alpha. His warriors are trained killers. You can't face them alone. Can I? The question was asked mildly, but something in Kane's smile made her step back. For just a moment, she caught a glimpse of something wild and predatory in his gray eyes. Something that made her wolf instincts scream danger. Then the moment passed, and he was just Kane again. Gentle, scarred Kane who fed her son goat's milk and spoke in quiet tones by the firelight. Trust me, he said softly. Please. The howls were getting closer. Mira could hear individual voices now, Marcus's harsh bark, the twins' synchronized calls, at least 6 others. Too many for any lone wolf to handle, no matter how strong. But Kane was already walking toward the sounds, moving with fluid confidence. Mira clutched Phoenix to her chest and stumbled into the tent, her heart hammering against her ribs. Through the silk walls, she heard them arrive, the crash of bodies through underbrush, the sound of booted feet on stone. I can smell her, Marcus's voice carried clearly in the desert air. She's close. Fan out, came Damon's familiar command, and Myra's chest tightened with pain and rage. Search every inch. And remember, the child is not to be harmed. Whatever else he is, he's still my blood. Mira pressed her hand to her mouth to stifle a sob. Even now, even after everything, some part of her had hoped. Gentlemen. Kane's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts like a blade. It was still quiet, still controlled, but there was something underneath it now that hadn't been there before. Something that made the hair on her arms stand up. You're trespassing, Kane continued conversationally. I'll give you one chance to leave. Stand aside, stranger, Damon replied, and Mira could hear the alpha authority in his tone, the voice that compelled obedience from lesser wolves. We're tracking a dangerous criminal. Our business doesn't concern you. Kane laughed, and the sound was nothing like the gentle chuckles Mira had heard over the past few days. This laugh was cold, predatory, and utterly without mercy. Your business concerns me more than you know, he said. But you misunderstand. I wasn't asking you to leave. I was telling you. There are 8 of us and 1 of you, Marcus snarled. You're either very brave or very stupid. Neither, Kane replied. I'm just tired of uninvited guests. What happened next was unlike anything Mira had ever heard. The sounds of battle, snarling, snapping, the wet crunch of breaking bones, but over it all was something else. A roar that seemed to shake the very ground, deeper and more powerful than any wolf voice she'd ever heard. And then, impossibly, silence. Mira waited, her heart in her throat, Phoenix whimpering softly against her chest. Minutes stretched like hours. Had Kane won? Was he hurt? Were Damon's warriors regrouping for another attack? Finally, the tent flap moved aside and Kane stepped in. He was naked from the waist up, his scarred chest heaving slightly, but otherwise he looked completely unharmed. Not even winded. It's over, he said quietly. Are they? Gone. Kane's expression was unreadable. They won't be back. Mira stared at him, trying to process what she'd heard. 8 trained warriors, including an alpha, and Kane had dispatched them all without so much as a scratch? It was impossible. Unless. What are you? She whispered. Kane went very still. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the silk-draped space, Phoenix's soft breathing the only sound between them. I think, Kane said finally, you already know. And she did, in some deep, instinctive part of her that recognized power when it saw it. The expensive belongings, the casual authority, the way he'd handled 8 warriors like they were children playing at war. Kane wasn't just a lone wolf hiding in the wasteland. He was something far more dangerous. Show me, she said, surprising herself with her boldness. Kane's gray eyes searched her face. You're not afraid? I'm terrified, Mira admitted. But I need to know what I'm dealing with. For Phoenix's sake. Kane nodded slowly, then stepped back. The shift, when it came, was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Instead of the usual blur of motion as human became wolf, Kane's transformation was fluid, controlled, almost graceful. His wolf form was massive, easily twice the size of any normal werewolf, with midnight black fur that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. But it was his eyes that made her breath catch. They weren't the usual wolf yellow or brown. They were molten gold, ancient and knowing, and filled with a power that made her soul tremble. When he shifted back to human form, Mira was still staring. Now you know, Kane said quietly. She did know. The size, the power, the golden eyes, they all pointed to one impossible truth. Kane wasn't just any werewolf. He was an alpha king. And he was very, very interested in her son. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. The journey to Kane's territory took 2 days through mountain passes that didn't appear on any map Mira had ever seen. They traveled in a luxurious carriage that had appeared seemingly from nowhere, pulled by horses that moved with supernatural speed and sure-footedness over treacherous terrain. Kane rode alongside on a massive black stallion, his gray eyes constantly scanning their surroundings. He'd been different since revealing his true form, more distant, more guarded. The easy companionship they'd shared by the spring felt like a dream now, replaced by the careful politeness of a king entertaining a guest. A dangerous guest carrying an even more dangerous child. How much further? Mira asked as they crested another ridge. Phoenix was sleeping against her chest, blissfully unaware of the tension crackling between the adults. We're here, Kane replied and pointed ahead. Myra's breath caught in her throat. Hidden in a valley that shouldn't have existed, protected by peaks that scraped the sky, lay a city that belonged in fairy tales. Gleaming white towers spiraled toward the clouds, connected by graceful bridges that seemed to float in midair. Gardens cascaded down the mountainsides in impossible terraces of green, and she could see the shimmer of waterfalls threading between the buildings like silver ribbons. "Welcome to Shadowmere," Kane said, his voice carrying a note of pride despite his careful composure. "The last free kingdom of our kind." As they descended into the valley, Mira began to understand the true scope of what she was seeing. This wasn't just a hidden settlement, it was a thriving metropolis. Werewolves in both human and wolf form moved through the streets with purpose, and she could smell the rich scents of cooking food, blooming flowers, and the clean mountain air. But it was the way people reacted to Kane that truly drove home his status. As their carriage passed, werewolves dropped to one knee in respectful bows. Guards snapped to attention with military precision. Children peeked out from behind their parents' legs with wide, odd eyes. This was a king returning to his kingdom. The palace itself was a marvel of architecture and magic, its crystal walls seeming to grow directly from the mountain stone. Guards in silver armor flanked every entrance, and Mira could feel the weight of their stares as Kane helped her from the carriage. "Your Majesty," an elderly man with snow-white hair approached, his movements precise and formal. "Welcome home. The council has been awaiting your return." "Thank you, Aldrich." Kane's voice had taken on the measured tones of royalty. "Please have quarters prepared for our guests. The finest accommodations." Aldrich's pale eyes shifted to Mira and Phoenix, and she caught a flicker of something. Curiosity? Calculation? "Of course, Your Majesty. Shall I inform the council that you're ready to meet?" "Tomorrow," Kane said firmly. "Tonight our guests rest." As they walked through corridors lined with tapestries and artwork that spoke of centuries of history, Mira felt increasingly out of place. Her simple traveling clothes and unkempt hair seemed shabby in these surroundings, and she was acutely aware of the curious glances from passing courtiers. "Kane," she said quietly as they climbed a spiraling staircase. "I need to understand what's happening here. What you haven't told me." He paused at a landing, his hand resting on an ornate door handle. "You will. But first you need to rest. Recovery from your ordeal in the wasteland, proper food, clean clothes. Tomorrow we'll talk." The rooms he showed her into were more luxurious than anything she'd ever imagined. A sitting room with furniture upholstered in silk, a bedroom with a bed large enough for 6 people, and a nursery that had been hastily but expertly prepared for Phoenix. Servants appeared as if from thin air to draw her a bath, bring fresh clothes, and set up everything the baby might need. But luxury couldn't ease the growing knot of anxiety in Myra's stomach. She'd escaped one gilded cage only to find herself in another, more beautiful one. And this time, she didn't understand the rules. That evening, Kane joined her for dinner in her sitting room. He'd changed into formal court attire. A deep blue jacket embroidered with silver threads that caught the light like stars, dark pants that emphasized his lean strength, and a simple circlet of silver that rested on his dark hair like it belonged there. "You look like a king," Mira said as he settled across from her at the small dining table. "I am a king," Kane replied simply. "Something I should have told you from the beginning. Why didn't you?" Kane was quiet for a long moment, cutting his meat with precise movements. "When was the last time someone saw you for who you were, not what they needed you to be?" The question hit closer to home than Mira wanted to admit. "That's different." "Is it?" Kane's gray eyes met hers directly. "You were Damon's mate, not Mira the individual. You were the vessel for his heir, not a woman with her own thoughts and dreams. When was the last time someone simply enjoyed your company without wanting something from you?" Heat rose in Myra's cheeks because he was right. Even before her banishment, her life had been defined by her relationship to others: daughter, pack member, mate, mother. Never just herself. "So you lied to give me a few days of freedom?" she asked. "I postponed the truth to give us both a few days of simplicity," Kane corrected. "But those days are over now. Tomorrow you'll meet my council, and they'll explain why your son's birth has sent shockwaves through every werewolf pack from here to the eastern seas." Phoenix chose that moment to wake with a cry, and Mira automatically rose to tend to him. As she settled back into her chair to nurse, she caught Kane watching them with that same unreadable expression she'd seen before. "What is it?" she asked. "He's beautiful," Kane said quietly. "Perfect in every way. It seems impossible that anyone could see him as a threat. But they do. Yes, they do." Kane stood then, his dinner barely touched. "Get some rest, Mira. Tomorrow will be challenging." After he left, Mira tried to sleep, but her mind raced with questions and fears. What did the council want with Phoenix? What was this prophecy that had everyone so terrified? And why did Kane, an alpha king with seemingly unlimited power, seem so troubled by whatever was coming? She must have dozed eventually, because she woke to the sound of voices outside her door. Low, urgent whispers that made her wolf instincts prickle with alarm. Carefully, she placed the sleeping phoenix in his crib and crept to the door, pressing her ear against the wood. "Cannot allow personal feelings to cloud his judgment," a man's voice was saying. It sounded like Aldrich, Kane's advisor. "The prophecy is clear," another voice responded, this one female and coldly practical. "The silver child will bring either salvation or destruction. With stakes this high, we cannot afford to guess which. His Majesty refuses to consider the obvious solution," Aldrich continued. "But perhaps if the mother could be made to understand the greater good." "You're suggesting we separate them?" "I'm suggesting we present her with the facts and let her make the choice herself. What mother wouldn't sacrifice anything to protect her child? Even if that sacrifice means giving him up to those better equipped to handle his power." Myra's blood turned to ice. They were talking about taking Phoenix away from her, couching it in gentle terms and noble intentions, but the meaning was crystal clear. "And if she refuses?" the woman asked. "Then we remind her that she's a guest here, not a prisoner." Yet, the king's protection only extends so far, especially when the safety of all werewolf kind hangs in the balance. Their voices faded as they moved away, leaving Mira standing in the darkness with her heart pounding like a war drum. She looked toward the nursery where her son slept peacefully, his silver birthmark glowing faintly in the moonlight streaming through the window. They wanted to take him. These people who lived in luxury and spoke of prophecies and greater goods. They wanted to steal her baby and probably kill him, all while convincing themselves it was for the best. Just like Damon had done. Just like her pack had done. The only difference was the quality of the gilded cage. A soft knock on her door made her jump. "Mira." Kane's voice quiet and concerned. "May I come in?" She considered refusing, considered confronting him about what she'd overheard. Instead, she opened the door and stepped back, letting him see the fear and anger in her eyes. Kane took one look at her expression, and his face tightened. "You heard them. Your advisors want to take my son. Some of them do, yes. And you? What do you want, Kane? Or should I call you Your Majesty now?" Kane stepped into the room and closed the door behind him. In the soft lamplight, without his royal finery, he looked almost like the man who had saved her life at the spring. "Almost. I want to keep you both safe," he said simply. "But it's complicated." "Complicated." Mira laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what powerful men always say when they're about to betray someone weaker than themselves. "I'm not betraying you. Aren't you? You've been hunting for my son since before he was born, haven't you? The silver-haired pack in the wasteland. They were working for you. That's why they knew what his birthmark meant. That's why they let me go instead of killing me. They were herding me toward you." Kane's silence was answer enough. "How long?" Mira demanded. "How long have you been searching for the silver child?" 15 years, Kane admitted quietly. "Ever since the court seers had a vision of his coming. Every pregnant woman born under the blood moon, every child with unusual markings. I've investigated them all." "And what happened to those other children?" Kane's jaw tightened. "Nothing. They weren't the one prophesied. Your son is. So what makes Phoenix so special? What makes him worth this elaborate charade?" Kane moved to the window, staring out at his kingdom with hands clasped behind his back. "The prophecy speaks of a child born under the blood moon, marked with silver, who will possess the power to unite or destroy all werewolf packs. He'll either usher in a golden age of peace and prosperity, or he'll bring about our extinction. That's quite a burden to put on a baby. The prophecy is 3,000 years old, Mira. It's been passed down through every generation, waiting for this moment. The moment the silver child would finally be born." Mira sank into a chair, suddenly exhausted. "And your council thinks the safest option is to kill him before he can fulfill the destructive part of the prophecy." "Some of them, yes. But not you." Kane turned to face her, his gray eyes intense in the lamplight. "I've seen enough death in my lifetime. I won't add an innocent child to that count, prophecy or no prophecy." "Then what do you propose?" "I propose we give him the best possible chance to fulfill the positive aspects of the prophecy. Train him, guide him, surround him with wisdom and love. Teach him to use whatever power he possesses for good." It sounded reasonable. Noble even. But Mira had learned to distrust noble-sounding words from powerful men. "And what role do I play in this grand plan?" she asked. Kane was quiet for a long moment. "That depends." "On what?" "On whether you trust me." Mira looked at him, really looked at him. Kane stood like a king, carried himself with the confidence of someone born to command. But underneath the royal bearing, she could still see traces of the man who had tended her son with gentle hands, who had saved their lives without asking for anything in return. "I trusted Damon once," she said finally. "Look how that turned out. I'm not Damon. No, you're not. You're something far more dangerous. You're an alpha king with the power to make or break entire packs with a word. You've been hunting my son since before he was born. And now you want me to hand him over to you and trust that you'll keep him safe." "I want you to stay," Cain said quietly. "Both of you. Here, where I can protect you from those who would do Phoenix harm. As your guests. Or as your prisoners. As my—" Cain hesitated, and for the first time since she'd learned his true identity, she saw uncertainty in his expression. "As whatever you choose to be." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Mira felt her heart skip a beat despite everything. Despite the lies and the manipulation, and the impossible situation they found themselves in. "Your council will never accept that," she said. "My council serves at my pleasure, not the other way around. And if they decide I'm too dangerous to live? If they decide the only way to control Phoenix is to eliminate his mother?" Cain's expression hardened, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of the lethal power that had dispatched 8 trained warriors without breaking a sweat. "They wouldn't dare. Wouldn't they? You said yourself that some of them think killing Phoenix is the safest option. How big a leap is it from there to deciding his mother is also a threat?" Cain moved closer, close enough that she could smell his scent, sandalwood and something wild that made her pulse quicken. "I would never let them hurt you. You can't watch us every moment of every day. Can I?" The question was asked softly, but there was steel underneath it. And something else, something that looked almost like longing. "What are you saying, Cain?" Instead of answering, he reached out and touched her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone with infinite gentleness. "I'm saying that some things are worth fighting for. Some people are worth protecting, regardless of the cost." Myra's breath caught in her throat. "Cain, I know you don't trust me. I know you have every reason to doubt my motives. But I need you to know that whatever happens tomorrow, whatever my council demands or threatens or argues, I will not let them take Phoenix from you. I will not let them hurt either of you." "Why?" The question slipped out before she could stop it. "Why does it matter to you? You're a king. You could have any woman you wanted, any family you chose. Why risk everything for a banished she-wolf and her supposedly cursed child?" Cain's hand stilled against her cheek. "Because from the moment I saw you defending him against impossible odds, refusing to give up even when you were dying of thirst in the wasteland, I knew you were the strongest person I'd ever met. And because when I look at Phoenix, I don't see a curse or a prophecy. I see a child who deserves the chance to grow up safe and loved." He paused, his gray eyes searching her face. "And because when I look at you, I see everything I never knew I was missing." The admission hung between them like a bridge neither of them was quite ready to cross. Mira felt tears prick her eyes, but whether from fear or hope or something else entirely she couldn't say. "Tomorrow," she said finally. "We'll face whatever comes tomorrow." Cain nodded and stepped back, his hand falling away from her face. "Tomorrow. But tonight, know that you're under the protection of the crown. Whatever else happens, that will not change." After he left, Mira stood in the darkness for a long time, staring at the door he'd disappeared through. Outside, she could hear the night sounds of the palace, guards changing shifts, servants moving through corridors, the distant sound of music from some celebration. Normal sounds from a normal royal court. But nothing about this situation was normal. She was a banished pack member in love with a king who'd been hunting her child. Her son was supposedly prophesied to either save or destroy their entire race. And tomorrow, she would face a council that might very well decide both their fates. Moving to the nursery, she looked down at Phoenix sleeping peacefully in his golden crib. His silver birthmark seemed to pulse gently in the moonlight, and she wondered what power lay dormant in his tiny body. What destiny awaited him in this hidden kingdom among the clouds? "Whatever comes," she whispered to her sleeping son, "we'll face it together. I promise." But even as she made the vow, she couldn't shake the feeling that forces beyond her control were already setting tomorrow's events in motion. And that by the time the sun set again, everything she thought she knew about Cain, about the prophecy, about her son's future, would be turned upside down. In the shadows outside her window, golden eyes watched and waited. The silver child had come home at last. But whether that homecoming would bring salvation or destruction remained to be seen. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. Mira woke to the sound of war horns echoing through the valley. She bolted upright, her heart hammering as the deep, mournful calls reverberated off the mountain peaks. Phoenix stirred in his crib, whimpering softly at the unfamiliar noise. Outside her window, she could see guards running along the palace walls, their silver armor glinting in the dawn light. The door to her chambers burst open without ceremony, and Cain strode in wearing full battle armor, black leather and steel that made him look like something from a warrior's legend. His gray eyes were hard as winter storms. "We're under attack," he said without preamble. "Get dressed. Now. Attack." Mira scrambled out of bed, reaching for Phoenix. Who would dare attack the Alpha King? Cain's jaw tightened. "Your former mate. Damon brought an army." The words hit her like a physical blow. "That's impossible. He banished us." "Why would he?" "Because his pack is fracturing," Cain interrupted, moving to the window to scan the approaching forces. "Word of your son's birthmark has spread. Some see it as a sign of divine favor, others as a curse that's infected their Alpha's bloodline. Damon needs to prove his strength, and publicly executing the cursed child will unite his pack behind him." Myra's blood turned to ice. "He wants to kill Phoenix. In front of everyone. He wants to kill Phoenix to save his own leadership," Cain corrected grimly. "But he'll have to go through me first." As if summoned by his words, a voice boomed across the valley, magically amplified to carry to every corner of Shadowmere. "Cain of the Mountain Crown." Damon's familiar voice made Myra's skin crawl. "You harbor a criminal and an abomination. Return what belongs to my pack, and we will withdraw in peace." Cain moved to the balcony, his presence commanding even at this distance. When he spoke, his voice carried the same magical resonance, but with a power that made the very air vibrate. "Damon of Moonridge, you trespass on sovereign territory. Withdraw your forces or face the consequences. The child is mine by blood and law." Damon's response crackled with rage. "I will have what is mine." "The child is under royal protection," Cain replied, his voice deadly calm. "As is his mother. You have no claim here." From the balcony, Mira could see them now. Hundreds of wolves spread across the valley floor like a dark tide. Damon stood at their head in his human form, but even at this distance she could see the way power radiated from him. He'd brought his entire pack, plus allies from neighboring territories. "Look at them all," she whispered, moving to Cain's side. "There are so many." "Numbers aren't everything," Cain said, but she could hear the tension in his voice. "My wolves are better trained, better equipped. We have the advantage of high ground and defensive positions." "But," Cain's hand found hers, squeezing gently. "But he's right about one thing. This is about more than just Phoenix now. If I'm seen as weak, if other packs think they can challenge my authority and win, it will mean war across all territories." Understanding dawned cold and terrible. "So this isn't just about us anymore." "It was never just about you," Cain said softly. "The moment Phoenix was born, it became about the future of every werewolf alive. Damon's just the first to try and control that future through violence." Another magically amplified voice cut through the morning air. This one Cain's advisor, Aldrich. "Your Majesty, the Council requests your immediate presence in the war room." Cain's expression darkened. "They're going to want me to hand Phoenix over. Argue that one child isn't worth a war. And what will you tell them?" Cain turned to face her fully, his gray eyes blazing with determination. "That some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost." The war room was chaos. Maps covered every surface, marked with troop positions and defensive strategies. The council members were arguing loudly, their voices overlapping in a cacophony of fear and anger. "Cannot risk the entire kingdom for one child. Principle of royal protection is sacred. Damon has 1,200 warriors, we have fewer than 800. The prophecy clearly states." "Enough!" Cain's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Instant silence fell. "What are our options?" General Marcus, not to be confused with Damon's beta, stepped forward with military precision. "We can hold the palace indefinitely, Your Majesty. Our defenses are strong, and we have sufficient supplies for a siege. But every hour we delay gives Damon time to call in more allies. Already we've received reports of the Ironback pack moving to join him. If this drags on, we could face 3,000 wolves within a week." Counselor Elena, an elderly woman with silver hair and sharp eyes, spoke up. "There is another option, Your Majesty. One that would end this without bloodshed." Cain's expression didn't change, but Mira felt him tense beside her. Speak. Give them the child, but not for execution. Propose a trial by combat instead. If Damon wins, he takes the child and leaves. If you win, he withdraws his claim and his army. Absolutely not, Cain said flatly. Your Majesty, with respect, your personal feelings cannot. My personal feelings? Cain's voice dropped to a deadly whisper. You think this is about personal feelings? Elena had the grace to look uncomfortable, but she pressed on. The child's power is unknown, untested. He could be the salvation of our people, or he could be our destruction. Is it worth risking everything we've built here for a possibility? Yes, Cain said simply. It is. Before anyone could respond, a new voice entered the conversation, one that made every wolf in the room go rigid with primal fear. How touching! The great Alpha King, willing to sacrifice his kingdom for a bastard child. The voice came from everywhere and nowhere, seeming to whisper from the very shadows of the room. Ancient, cold, and filled with malevolent amusement. Shadow wolves, General Marcus breathed, his face pale. Cain moved instantly, placing himself between the council and the darkest corner of the room where the shadows seemed to writhe and move with unnatural life. Show yourselves, he commanded. The shadows coalesced into forms that hurt to look at directly. Wolves that seemed made of living darkness, their eyes like red embers in the void. At their head stood a figure that was more nightmare than wolf, tall and gaunt with fingers that ended in claws like black ice. Valdris, Cain said, his voice steady despite the obvious threat. Still hiding in shadows like the coward you are. The shadow wolf leader laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Still playing king, little pup? We felt the child's awakening. Such power, such delicious corruptible power. Myra's arms tightened around Phoenix instinctively. The baby had been fussing since the shadow wolves appeared, his silver birthmark glowing brighter than she'd ever seen it. The child is under my protection, Cain said. Your protection? Valdris tilted his head like a curious predator. And what happens when you're dead? When your pretty kingdom burns and your wolves lie broken in their own blood? Who protects the child then? That won't happen. Won't it? Even now, your enemies gather at your gates. The Ironback Pack, the Bloodclaw clan, even some of your own nobles who think you've grown weak and sentimental. They smell weakness, Cain. And weakness attracts predators. Valdris turned his burning gaze to Mira, and she felt like ice water had been poured down her spine. But there is another way, little mother. Give the child to us willingly, and we will ensure he grows up safe and strong. Imagine what he could become with proper guidance. You mean corruption, Cain snarled. I mean fulfillment, Valdris replied smoothly. The prophecy speaks of a child who will either save or destroy the werewolf race. Why should it not be both? Destroy the old, weak order and build something new and glorious in its place. Phoenix's cries grew louder, and his birthmark was now blazing like a silver star. The very air around him seemed to shimmer with power. Never, Mira said, finding her voice at last. I'll never let you touch my son. Valdris smiled, revealing teeth like black daggers. We shall see. The shadow wolves melted back into darkness, their leader's voice echoing from everywhere at once. Enjoy your war, little king. We'll be waiting for the victor. The silence that followed was deafening. Well, Counselor Elena said shakily, that complicates things considerably. Before Cain could respond, another horn sounded, this one from their own walls. Damon's moving, General Marcus reported, listening to signals from the watchtowers. Full assault on the eastern gates. Cain's expression hardened into something carved from stone. Then we meet them. All forces to defensive positions. Protect the non-combatants and guard the palace with your lives. And the child? Elena asked. Stays with me, Cain said firmly. Where I can protect him personally. Your Majesty, that's not. That's an order. As the council scattered to their positions, Cain turned to Mira. I need you to stay in the inner sanctum with Phoenix. It's the most protected part of the palace. I'm not hiding while you fight for our lives, Mira protested. You're not hiding. You're protecting our son. The possessive language hit her like a lightning bolt. Our son. Not your son or the child. In Cain's mind, Phoenix had already become part of their family. Cain! He cupped her face in his hands, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone like he had the night before. I need to know you're safe. Both of you. If something happens to me, nothing will happen to you. If something happens to me, he continued as if she hadn't spoken, Aldrich will help you escape. There are passages that lead deep into the mountains. You can disappear, start over somewhere safe. Stop talking like you're going to die. Cain leaned down and kissed her then, fierce and desperate, and full of everything they hadn't had time to say. When he pulled back, his gray eyes were blazing. "I love you," he said simply. "Both of you. And I will come back to you." Then he was gone, leaving Mira standing in the war room with her heart in her throat and Phoenix glowing like a star in her arms. The battle, when it came, shook the very foundations of the mountain. From the inner sanctum's reinforced windows, Mira could see Kane's forces meeting Damon's army at the palace's outer defenses. Wolves clashed in both human and wolf form, the sound of steel on steel mixing with snarls and howls that echoed off the peaks. Kane fought like something from legend, his massive black wolf form cutting through enemy ranks with deadly precision. Even in human form, wielding a sword that gleamed like starlight, he was poetry in motion, beautiful and terrible and absolutely lethal. But there were so many of them. For every enemy he cut down, 2 more seemed to take their place. "We're losing," Aldrich said grimly from beside her. The advisor had stayed to guard them personally, his own sword drawn and ready. "The eastern wall has been breached. They're in the courtyard." As if to punctuate his words, the sounds of battle grew closer. Phoenix had been crying almost constantly since the fighting started, his birthmark so bright it illuminated the entire room. "He knows," Mira whispered, rocking her son gently. "Somehow he knows Kane is in danger." "The child's power is growing stronger," Aldrich observed. "I can feel it from here, like standing next to a lightning storm." Through the window, Mira saw Kane and Damon finally face each other in the main courtyard. Even at this distance, she could see the rage radiating from her former mate, the way he moved like a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. They shifted to wolf form simultaneously, Kane's midnight black meeting Damon's tawny gold in a collision that sent shockwaves through the stone beneath their feet. They were perfectly matched in size and strength, but Damon fought with the desperation of a man with everything to lose. "Come on," Mira whispered, her hands pressed against the reinforced glass. "Come on, Kane." That's when she saw it, the flash of silver in Damon's jaws. A blade, blessed and consecrated with ancient magic. Silver that could kill even an Alpha King. "No!" she screamed, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Phoenix's cry joined hers, but his wasn't the helpless wail of a frightened infant. This was something else, a sound that seemed to resonate with power itself. The silver birthmark exploded with light, so bright it was visible even in daylight. And suddenly, impossibly, a dome of pure silver energy erupted from the baby's tiny body, expanding outward like a shockwave. It passed harmlessly through Mira and Aldrich, through the palace walls and Kane's defenders. But when it reached Damon, poised to deliver the killing blow with his silver blade, it hit him like a physical force. The enemy Alpha was thrown backwards, his weapon spinning away into the crowd. The dome continued expanding, washing over every enemy wolf in sight. They didn't die, but they stopped fighting, their faces slack with shock and something that looked almost like reverence. In the sudden silence, Kane struggled to his feet in human form, blood streaming from wounds across his chest and arms. He looked up at the sanctum windows, his gray eyes finding Myra's across the distance. "The prophecy," Aldrich breathed beside her. "The child's power, it's beyond anything we imagined." But their relief was short-lived. As Phoenix's energy dome faded, more shapes emerged from the shadows at the edges of the courtyard. Shadow wolves, dozens of them, moving like living nightmares toward the exhausted defenders. They were waiting, Mira realized with growing horror. They wanted us weakened by the battle. Valdris stepped into the courtyard, his form shifting between wolf and something darker, more primal. "Such beautiful power," he called out, his voice carrying on unnatural winds. "Thank you for the demonstration, child. Now come to us willingly, and we will spare your protectors' lives." Kane raised his sword, but Mira could see him swaying with exhaustion and blood loss. Around him, his remaining defenders formed a protective circle, but they were outnumbered 3-1. Phoenix's cries had stopped. In the sudden quiet, his silver birthmark pulsed steadily, like a heartbeat made of light. "I have to go to them," Mira said suddenly. "Absolutely not," Aldrich replied firmly. His Majesty's orders were clear. "You stay here where it's safe." "Safe?" Mira laughed bitterly. "Look around, Aldrich. Nowhere is safe anymore. The shadow wolves will break through eventually, and when they do, we'll be trapped with nowhere to run. The secret passages lead right into their hands. You think they don't know about every tunnel and hidden door in this place?" Mira moved toward the door, Phoenix cradled protectively against her chest. "The only chance we have is if I get down there and let Phoenix use his power to protect Kane and the others." "You don't understand," Aldrich said desperately. The child's power is untested, uncontrolled. Using it too much could burn him out completely. It could kill him. Mira paused at the door, looking back at the advisor who'd served Kane faithfully for so many years. Then that's a choice I have to make. As his mother. Mira, please. Kane said some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost, she said quietly. My son's future, in a world where he's free to choose his own destiny instead of being corrupted or killed. That's worth fighting for. She looked down at Phoenix, whose silver eyes were now open and staring at her with an intelligence that seemed far too ancient for an infant. And the man who was willing to risk everything to protect us both, he's worth fighting for too. Before Aldrich could stop her, Mira was through the door and running toward the battle that would determine all their fates. In the courtyard below, Kane rallied his remaining forces for one last stand against the encroaching darkness. He didn't know that salvation was racing toward him, glowing like a silver star in his beloved's arms. But the Shadow Wolves sensed it. And Damon, recovering from the shock of Phoenix's power, sensed it too. The final confrontation was about to begin. And this time, there would be no mercy for the losing side. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. Mira burst into the courtyard just as Damon's silver blade found its mark. The consecrated weapon slid between Kane's ribs with a sound like breaking crystal, and the Alpha King's roar of pain echoed off the mountain peaks. He stumbled backward, one hand pressed to the wound as silver blood, poisoned by the blessed metal, began to flow between his fingers. Kane! Myra's scream tore from her throat as she watched the man she loved fall to his knees. Damon stood over him, his golden eyes blazing with triumph and madness. Look how the mighty fall, he snarled, raising the silver blade for the killing blow. Your precious king dies, and with him, any protection for my cursed spawn. But as he brought the weapon down, Phoenix's birthmark exploded with light. The silver radiance erupted from the baby like a star being born, washing over the entire courtyard in waves of pure, healing energy. Damon's blade stopped mid-strike, his entire body frozen as if time itself had paused. Impossible, Valdris hissed from the shadows, his red eyes wide with something that might have been fear. The child's power, it's not what we expected. Kane looked up at Mira as she ran toward him, Phoenix glowing like a beacon in her arms. Blood was spreading across his chest, but his gray eyes were clear and focused on her face. You should have stayed safe, he whispered as she dropped to her knees beside him. Safe is wherever you are, she replied fiercely, tears streaming down her cheeks. I won't lose you. Not now. Not ever. Phoenix's cries had transformed into something else, not the wails of distress, but sounds that seemed to resonate with the very fabric of reality. His tiny hands reached toward Kane, and Mira felt an overwhelming urge to place her son against the wounded king's chest. Mira, no, Kane protested weakly. The silver poison, it could hurt him. Trust me, she whispered, echoing his words from days ago. Trust us. She placed Phoenix's small hands directly over Kane's wound, and the world exploded into silver fire. Light poured from the baby's birthmark like liquid starlight, surrounding both Kane and the blade embedded in his chest. But instead of the destructive force everyone had feared, the light was warm, healing, filled with love so pure it made the very air sing. The silver blade dissolved like morning mist, its poison neutralized by Phoenix's radiance. Kane's wound began to close, the torn flesh knitting itself back together as if it had never been harmed. The pallor faded from his skin, replaced by vibrant health and strength. By the ancient gods, someone whispered, one of Kane's soldiers, staring in awe at the miraculous healing. Kane sat up slowly, his hand moving to where the mortal wound had been. There wasn't even a scar. Phoenix's light faded to a gentle glow, and the baby settled peacefully in Myra's arms, his silver eyes bright and alert. He's not a destroyer, Mira breathed, understanding flooding through her like dawn breaking over the mountains. He's a healer, a bridge between what was and what could be. Kane reached out with trembling fingers to touch Phoenix's face, wonder written across his features. The prophecy, we read it wrong. All of us. For 3,000 years, we feared the silver child would bring destruction. But he doesn't destroy the old world, he heals it. He transforms it into something better. Damon had stumbled backward during the healing, his face a mask of shock and growing horror. No, he whispered. No, that's not, the child is cursed. He brings death and chaos. He brings change. Kane said firmly, rising to his feet with renewed strength. And you're so afraid of change that you can't see the miracle in front of you. The shadow wolves had been watching the healing in stunned silence, but now Valdris stepped forward, his form writhing with dark energy. Miracle or not, the ancient evil snarled, the child's power will be ours. We have waited too long to be denied now. You've waited for nothing, Mira said, standing beside Kane with Phoenix in her arms. For the first time since this nightmare began, she felt no fear. Her son's true nature had been revealed, and it was beautiful beyond imagining. Phoenix doesn't belong to prophecies or politics or ancient grudges. He belongs to love. Valdris laughed, a sound like breaking bones. Love? You think love will protect you from us? I think, Kane said, moving to flank Myra's other side, that you're about to find out. The shadow wolves attacked as one, pouring across the courtyard like a tide of living darkness. But as they closed in, something extraordinary happened. Phoenix's birthmark began to glow again, but this time the light was joined by something else. Kane's own power, ancient and royal and fierce, rose to meet it. And from Mira, who had never shown more than basic werewolf abilities, came a third strand of energy, silver-white and blazing with maternal protectiveness. The three powers wove together like threads in a tapestry, creating something greater than the sum of its parts. A barrier of pure light erupted around them, expanding outward in all directions. When it touched the shadow wolves, they didn't die, they were transformed. The darkness that had consumed them for millennia was burned away, revealing the wolves they had once been before corruption took hold. They collapsed to the ground, gasping and whole for the first time in centuries. Only Valdris resisted, his form writhing as he fought against the transforming light. This cannot be, he screamed. We are eternal. We are. You are forgiven, Phoenix said. The words came from the baby's mouth in a voice that was his own but somehow older, filled with wisdom and compassion beyond his years. The silver light intensified, washing over Valdris with gentle but irresistible force. The ancient shadow wolf leader's scream cut off abruptly. His dark form began to crack like ice in spring sunlight, revealing something underneath. Not a monster, but a wolf who had been lost to despair and hatred so long ago that he'd forgotten his own name. When the light faded, an ordinary gray wolf lay where Valdris had stood, his eyes no longer burning with malevolence but clear and confused, as if waking from a very long nightmare. It's over, Kane said softly, his arm tightening around Myra's waist. It's finally over. But even as peace settled over the courtyard, Damon staggered forward, his face twisted with anguish and something that might have been understanding. What have I done? He whispered, falling to his knees before them. Dear gods, what have I done? Mira looked down at her former mate, the man who had cast her out, who had tried to kill their son, who had brought war to Kane's doorstep. She should have felt hatred, or at least satisfaction at his defeat. Instead, she felt only sadness. You were afraid, she said quietly. We all were. But fear doesn't excuse what you did to us. I know. Damon's voice was barely a whisper. I know, and Mira, I'm so sorry. You tried to tell me, but I was too proud, too frightened of what the pack would think. I threw away everything that mattered because I was a coward. Kane's hand moved to the sword at his side, his expression hard. You brought an army to my gates. You tried to murder an infant. You nearly started a war that would have consumed every pack from here to the eastern seas. I know, Damon repeated, and Mira was shocked to see tears streaming down his face. I know what I am, what I've become. But please, let me see him. Just once. Let me see my son as he truly is, not as I convinced myself he was. Mira looked at Kane, seeing her own internal struggle reflected in his gray eyes. Justice demanded that Damon pay for his crimes. But mercy. Phoenix stirred in her arms, his silver eyes focusing on the broken man kneeling before them. The baby made a soft sound, not distress, but something that sounded almost like forgiveness. One look, Mira said finally. Then you leave. You go back to your pack, and you tell them the truth about what happened here. About what Phoenix really is. Damon nodded eagerly, rising on shaking legs. As he approached, Mira saw the full extent of the damage the battle had wrought on him. Cuts and bruises covered his body, and there was something in his eyes, a hollow emptiness that spoke of wounds deeper than flesh. When he looked down at Phoenix, his face crumpled completely. He's perfect, Damon whispered. He's absolutely perfect, and I called him an abomination. I tried to. He couldn't finish the sentence. Phoenix reached up with one tiny hand, his fingers brushing against his biological father's cheek. Where he touched, a faint silver glow appeared, and some of the pain in Damon's eyes eased. "He forgives you," Mira said, understanding flooding through her. "Even after everything, he forgives you. I don't deserve it." "None of us deserve forgiveness," Kane said quietly. "That's what makes it a gift." Damon nodded, stepping back with obvious reluctance. "I'll tell them. My pack, the others who came here, I'll make sure they know the truth. That the Silver Child brings healing, not destruction." He turned to go, then paused, looking back at them one final time. "Be happy," he said simply. "All of you. Be happy in ways I was too foolish to allow." Then he walked away, gathering his remaining warriors with quiet commands. Mira watched him go, feeling a chapter of her life closing forever. "Will he keep his word?" Kane asked. "Yes," Mira said with certainty. "He's many things, but he's not a liar. He'll tell them what he saw here." Around them, the courtyard was slowly returning to normal. Kane's soldiers were tending to their wounded, while the former shadow wolves, now free of their corruption, were being helped to their feet and offered food and shelter. The sun was setting behind the mountain peaks, painting everything in shades of gold and crimson. "Come," Kane said, taking her free hand. "There's something I need to do." He led her to the center of the courtyard, where his remaining nobles and soldiers had gathered. When he spoke, his voice carried across the space with royal authority. "Today we witnessed something that will be remembered for generations," he began. "The fulfillment of the oldest prophecy our people have known. But more than that, we witnessed the triumph of love over fear, of hope over despair." His gray eyes found Myra's, and she felt her heart skip a beat at the intensity in his gaze. "I have ruled alone for many years," Kane continued, "believing that was the burden of kingship. But I was wrong. True strength comes not from standing alone, but from finding someone worthy to stand beside you." He released her hand and dropped to one knee before her, and Myra's breath caught in her throat. "Mira of the Moonridge Pack," he said formally, his voice carrying to every corner of the courtyard. "You have shown courage that puts warriors to shame, love that conquered ancient evil, and wisdom that sees truth where others see only fear. Will you stand beside me? Will you be my queen, my mate, my partner in all things?" Mira looked down at him, this powerful king kneeling before her in front of his entire court, and felt tears of joy spill down her cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then louder, "Yes." Kane rose and kissed her then, fierce and joyful and full of promise. Around them, the courtyard erupted in cheers and howls of celebration. Even Phoenix seemed to approve, his silver birthmark glowing softly as if in blessing. When they finally broke apart, Kane placed his hand gently on Phoenix's head. "And you, little prince," he said softly, "will grow up knowing you are loved not for what prophecies say about you, but for who you choose to become." As if in response, Phoenix reached up and grasped Kane's finger with surprising strength. The baby's silver eyes met the king's gray ones, and Mira would swear she saw understanding pass between them. A bond forming that had nothing to do with magic or prophecy, and everything to do with love. "A new era begins tonight," Kane announced to the gathered crowd. "An era of healing instead of division, of hope instead of fear. The Silver Child has come home, and with him comes the dawn of something beautiful." The cheers that rose from the courtyard echoed off the mountain peaks and carried on the wind, spreading the news to every corner of the kingdom. In villages and cities throughout the realm, wolves would hear the story of this day and know that change was coming. Good change. Healing change. The kind of change that comes when love conquers all. As the stars emerged overhead, Mira stood in Kane's arms with their son between them, and for the first time since Phoenix's birth, she felt truly at peace. The prophecy had been fulfilled, but not in the way anyone expected. The Silver Child had indeed transformed the werewolf world. He had transformed it with love. And in the warm glow of that love, under the silver light of the rising moon, a new chapter in the history of their people began. A chapter written not in blood and fear, but in hope and healing and the unbreakable bonds of family. The dawn of the Silver Age had come at last. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily, and also to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.